Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Good Cast Show. So today I'm very excited because we have another book to review. It's called Shattered Hopes. It's already incurring the wrath of many of our political ruling elite, such as Tan Sri Lim Kit Siang and Anthony Lok, who have criticized the book heavily. So you know it's worth a read. Take this book. I've read it, and this book, let me tell you, if you liked the book Billion Dollar Whale, if you liked the show Man on the Run, you will love this book. It takes you back into the inner circles of, a time when we were all so happy and euphoric about a change of government back in 2018, right up to the collapse 22 months later, and all the inner circle, the whispers and the conversations that took place behind the curtain. And all this thanks to my guest, Mr. Romen Bose, an international correspondent with over 22 years of experience. He's worked with Al Jazeera International and Channel News Asia. So I hope after this he tries to get me a job there. He has consulted for the United Nations and even the Singapore Tourism Board. And get this, he was the former communications consultant of the former Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Najib, whom he speaks about a lot here. Let me tell you, this guy, he has the cojones the size of KLCC. He's taken shots at many, many people, including people such as Zeti Aziz, Lim Kit Siang, Lim Guan Eng. The man has held back no punches, and can't wait to see how this book does and how many people it pisses. I'm sure we are going to piss off a lot of people today. So ladies and gentlemen, please, without further ado, please welcome Romen Bose. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. I'm well, thank you. Yes, yeah. Let's see how many people we can piss.
Yeah. Exactly, this is going to be one of those. Now, like I said, this book, you mention a lot of names. Tun Mahathir is one of them. Zeti Aziz, you talk about Justice Nazdan, Tommy Thomas. They all don't get any compassion from you. So what inspired you to write this book, knowing that you are going to anger these people?
Well, actually, I wasn't going to write this book. But what happened was just before COVID hit, I was sitting and I was speaking to my agent, and we were talking about all kinds of projects, things I could write on, fiction, all kinds of fun things to write on. And as this conversation was going on, my phone was just going crazy because this was February 2020, right? Just before COVID hit. The phone was going crazy, and I was looking at these and I was getting messages from all my friends in KL. All these people I hadn't seen in 3-4 years, because I had left Malaysia on 11th May 2018, the day after GE14, and I hadn't been back. But I was in touch with all my friends, and many of them were in the opposition, many in government. So some of them were in the current administration, some were outside of administration. And without fail, all of these guys were messaging me saying, hey, do you know what's going on? This is what's happening. Hey, this is the situation. My God, can you believe this? And I was saying, okay, fine, yeah, whatever, okay. So I just put the phone down. I sat down. So my agent was asking me, so, what's all these messages? I said, there's all these things going on in Malaysia. And he says, look, this sounds really interesting. I say, come on,
It is.
Yeah, it could be interesting, but, this is inside baseball. And in 22 months, really, what could have actually happened in Malaysia? Not very much, So we ended the conversation. Then after I went back, I looked at the messages, and then I scrolled back to the messages that they had sent me over the last 2 years, over the last 22 months. And then I said, oh my God, actually, there is a book in there.
Yeah.
Because there was so much that happened, and the cast of characters that we saw.
Amazing.
It was unbelievable. And what was shocking was the fact that the person who had created the system of patronage, the kind of patronage politics, the leakages in government, crisis in racial relations. The person who had created all of this had been re-elected to remove this system.
Yeah.
The guy who had actually built this system. So that in itself was
ironic.
Was very ironic.
Yeah.
And the fact that then he peed on everybody and did the exact same thing was stunning.
Yes,
and the people were surprised by that. That was the story, right?
Yeah.
So as a journalist, with 22 years of experience, I said, look, I have to document this story. I've got to put it down. I've got to make sure that people actually know what transpired.
No, and you do a fantastic job at that. And one thing I love about this book, though, although it's based on facts, it's based on your own insider knowledge, because you talk a lot of conversations, a lot of things we don't know are in this book, actually, a lot of revelations. But you write it in such a fast-paced manner. It's like a fiction, but it's amazing. You guys should. I honestly love this book.
Yeah. You see, and that's the thing. I mean, you might think, wow, it reads like a great fiction. Like, wow, this is fantastic. But as I say at the beginning of the book, and as I always say, the truth is very often stranger than fiction.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you actually learn the truth, you think, oh my God, I couldn't even write this stuff.
Yeah. You can.
And if you ask me, Netflix, if you're out there, please, you should approach me. I think we've got a bestseller. I think we've got a bestseller.
Because I saw the documentary, Man on the Run. That was basically retelling of what I already knew. But this book, there's a lot of things I didn't know. So let's get into that.
Okay.
Let's start go back all the way from that moment, 2018 elections. I still remember that day very well. I was outside of my balcony and I could see the motorcade coming and we were all cheering, wow, change has come.
Exactly.
The BN regime is so down. Now, tell us, you were close to Najib as well at that time. You were working for him. I remember there was on the news there were scenes where I saw KJ coming up to his house, and then people saying they were saying no, we will release a statement tomorrow. You mentioned in the book that at that time he was talking to Anwar and trying to work a deal. What was this deal?
Well, let me tell you. I mean, I'll go a little bit back. I'll explain to you how I was seen in that scenario. We were all at PWTC. I mean, that's where the BN War Room, all of this stuff was happening. And right up until 9 or 10 o'clock, really, we had no inkling of what had actually happened. Everyone was still very positive. Then no news. There was literally no information. And by midnight, and we were separated from all the bigwigs. I mean, we were just seated there, just trying to figure out what was happening. We were monitoring social media, seeing what was happening, and we didn't hear anything. But by midnight, that's when the big guns came down and told us, look, it's gone. We've lost, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But having said it's unbelievable, I believed it. Why? Because on the 2nd of May, and this is in my first book, Final Reckoning, people, if you want to get a copy of that, also published by Penguin.
We'll share the links as well.
In my first book, I say on the 2nd of May, 2018, I spoke to Najib and I told him, and based on our online sentiments, that BN would lose the seat of Johor. So the fact that you lose Johor, the bastion of UMNO, should have been a signal warning that was, and we said, look, it's a very high possibility you're going to lose Johor, because looking at our analysis, our sentiment, gathering of these areas, you are going to lose Johor. You have to do something radical now. But all other sources were telling Najib, no, actually you're going to have a big victory, you're going to win. So he told me, Romen, are you sure? Are you sure, what you said is accurate? At which point, I was also wondering to myself, look, if everyone is telling the Prime Minister that he's going to win, in all these areas, maybe my stuff's wrong. Maybe my stuff's inaccurate. So I went back, checked with my team, what have you, redid the calculations, and it looked correct. But again, everyone, the entire machinery was saying, no, it's going to be a devastating 3-quarter win and what have you.
3-quarter win?
Yeah, that they would actually be able to regain.
Especially considering in 2008 they lost 5 states. How can they say 3-quarter?
Again, so you have to wonder, right? You have to wonder about this analysis. But again, that was not me.
Yeah, not you.
Not me.
So you made the right call.
I still got the paperwork, baby. I still have all of that.
Okay.
To tell you what we presented, what we showed, and that was our assessment of the situation. So when all of this happened, we were at PWTC, and Najib hadn't come to PWTC. He was in his house. With all the bigwigs trying to figure out what the scenario was. So I went to his place. I snuck out quietly from PWTC. I mean, using the backlift, because I didn't want to be caught in the big drama going on outside. All the cameras were there. Everyone was there with microphones. Everyone was being, what do you call that? Not microphone, but, door stopped for their comments. I had no comments because, what do you say in this kind of a situation? So I went up to his house. And it was really, really spooky because I managed to get through security, which was quite tight. They had to check all of our, credentials and stuff. So I went through. And outside his house, there were all these chairs and tables, like it was laid out for a party. But they were all abandoned. So huge spotlights, but completely empty. So tables and chairs were there, but there were no people there. Then I approached the house, and as you go near the steps, you see lots of shoes and stuff out there. And then open the door, and then I go in, right? And wow, it is just absolute gloom, right? People crying in some corners, other people just walking about aimlessly, not knowing what to do. Because the result was just so shocking. No one, despite warnings, right? No one expected such a result. So yes, Khairi was there, Hisham was there, Zahid was there. They were all, hunched with Najib, having a discussion as to what to do. And one of the options was to do a deal with Anwar. That was one of the options on the table. And from what I heard and witnessed at that time, it was clear that nobody in their right mind wanted to hand over power to the old man. Because the fear, and which was rightly proven, was that this person was only interested in getting revenge. He was not interested in running the country. It was pure revenge. So the idea was, how do you build a coalition? And in any other country, right? In any other country, this is normal. The Conservatives did this with the Lib Dems, where they formed a minority government because they didn't have enough seats. But when UMNO BN tried to do that, people thought, oh my God, they're trying to steal the vote. No, that's part of constitutional system. If you don't have enough seats, you see which other partners you can grab together. Yes, it's an alliance of convenience. Very true. But that's how the Westminster-style democracy works. So that's what Najib was trying to do. In that process, he was thinking, and his advisors were telling him, look, if you are able to work a deal with PKR, let's say, get the rump of PH to come and support you, the idea would be to have someone like Wan Aziza as Prime Minister, maybe Zahid as Deputy. Because Najib himself said, I don't want to be Prime Minister. I don't want any role in any new government. We have lost, and that's fine. So if there is to be a new government, if there is to be stability in Malaysia, why don't we push forward with this kind of model? So that was the kind of negotiations that were going on at that point. Some have denied it. Some have said that it's happened. It's up to them to interpret. But I can tell you from what I saw, there was definitely some kind of negotiation going on between Datuk Seri Najib and with Anwar.
Okay. So now then we go into PH 1.0, as you call many times in this book. Now, before we get into the details and all that, I want to share a theory of mine with you and see what your thoughts on it.
Sure.
After everything that happened, I think that one can extrapolate from your book, and even this is the idea, suspicion that I had, that Tun Mahathir's plan was exactly what happened after the whole Sheraton move. And I say this because there are two things. Number one, his motive was to quell the growing rebellion at that time. Because you must remember, this started way back in 1998, the whole Reformasi movement. And then years later, a decade later, it had matured into this strong movement that was very brave, gutsy. People were marching towards FRU cannons without a bother. People were opposing the entire BN apparatus openly, critically, right? Now, by doing this, the Sheraton move, immediately it kills hope. As just like what your book is titled, right? It removed. That is why now you see today, Malaysia's politics, there's a large sense of fatigue surrounding it, right? People don't care anymore. And that was what Mahathir wanted. And secondly, was to destroy PH. And he did it very well. He did it by playing to the fears of the Malay voters, because he appointed a lot of non-Malays. I was surprised why Lim Guan Eng is finance minister. What's the name? Latifah Koya, MACC. Tommy Thomas, and then you have the
Teresa
VK,
Kok.
Teresa
Yep.
Kok. But
Yep.
Teresa Kok, she's there lah. She's she's sepute lah. She's not going to. But then you had what's his name, VK Leong,
VK Liu.
VK Liu, the law minister.
Yep.
All of this with the narrative being built at the back, the apparatus saying that DAP is actually running the government. They want. So he did that. He put a stain on PH, and don't forget the whole ISID, right? He purposely, he's a Malay nationalist. He would never go for ISID, but he went for ISID. And at the end, what has happened now is that PH will always carry the stain that they are pro non-Bumi and they would never win an election. Was that possibly happen?
You see, the thing is, I mean, to some extent, I agree with your assessment. But I have to say, we give him way too much credit. For thinking like that, we would give him way too much credit. Because if you ask me, I believe, and I have to say this very carefully, I believe, so that I don't get sued, I believe the reason why he came back and wanted to do all of this was out of revenge. He wanted to nail Najib. And that was it. And prosecute him. He could not stand the situation. It was a personality thing. Everything else was an afterthought for him. This is why when he came in, there was no proper plan. Right? There was no Wawasan 2029, no Wawasan 3030. Right? Literally, the idea was to gain power so I can remove Najib from power. As he did with all of Najib's predecessors as well. All of his successors. And his, if you ask me, his approach was very simple, right? I agree with these guys because I need to get into power. Once I get into power, then I need to figure out how to remove these people. That's the fundamental thing. So yeah, if you want to appoint non-Chinese, non-Malays to all of these positions, fine, we will do that. But in the end, let me come up with a plan to see how we can actually remove all these people with one single swipe. And if you ask me, that I believe was his strategy. And you are right. For years, he had been indoctrinating the ground. Right? For years, he had been indoctrinating the ground saying that, these groups are basically not loyal to Malaysia. These groups are basically, you can't trust them and what have you. And in the end, this actually worked against him. And why do I say that? Because once you build this kind of racial, rhetoric, overnight, you can't tell people, oh no, actually this group is now fine. They actually helped build the country, they contributed. So if I'm sitting down in the kampong and I'm thinking, okay, for 22 years you told me that this is the enemy. Now, in less than 6 months, you're telling me best friends, and they're now forming positions in the government. Okay, all right. So this is the situation. I have to accept this. Okay, you veteran politician and what have you. I'm completely confused at this point. I don't know how to explain this to my family, how, this reality is happening. At which point, UMNO and PAS, known for their nationalist stance, seize on the opportunity, right? So they look at the government, they look at Mahathir having to make this compromise by having these guys in the government, and they say at that point, legitimately, actually, is this a Malay government? Or is this a non-Malay government? Are these guys, who's controlling the government? Is Mahathir really controlling government? Or are these guys controlling government? And if for 22 years you have been fed with this kind of indoctrination, what are you going to think? Are you going to think that this is a government that Mahathir controls and runs? Or are you going to all of a sudden feel fearful that, hey, maybe, what Mahathir said for 22 years actually is real? So in the end, his own rhetoric, his own, vitriol, toxic racial polemics bit him in the backside. And yes, and as a result, today we are facing the problems of that. The race relations are at its lowest because of this. And it's very hard for the unity government now to rebuild that. Because for once, you now have the majority of Malays and Chinese supporting a government. You've got that goodwill. But how do you get over the distrust that for those 22 years had been indoctrinated in the people? That is the big challenge. And, and that is a legacy that he has left us. He will be long gone, and we will have to suffer from that legacy, for decades more. Until we are able to rebuild the trust between Malays and non-Malays, which is so crucial for Malaysia to develop.
Definitely. Now, again, one thing that you talk a lot about this book, you criticize PH 1.0's appointees, ministers who lack the ability and lack the experience, which I agree. I think I was quite surprised. In fact, there's one thing that you talk about how, what's his name, the education minister, Mazli.
Yes.
And he was surprised that he became education minister. I don't know how that happens. Now, but, these appointees did not have the gravitas to inspire us. Was it just a case that the PH government was bad at spotting talent? Were they better opposition as opposed to a government? Or was it all just orchestrated negligence from Mahathir's side to implode the PH 1.0 government?
Again, the problem in Mahathir was, as I said, this remains my thesis, my belief, that from the beginning, all he wanted was revenge. Everything else he did was an afterthought in order to get into government. Because firstly, he didn't believe he'd get into government. So he thought, fine, I'll agree to all of this stuff, but if ever I get into government, maybe we have to resolve it. Then he is in government. Then he's got to figure out what to do. And remember, for the first 22 years, he had the entire BN infrastructure, right? And what we're talking about is at all levels of government, you would have you'd have political appointees, people who had experience from the corporate side and what have you coming in to contribute to a proper government, right? This is why he was able to come up with Wawasan 2020, a proper plan to help Malaysia develop, right? Take Malaysia to make it a tiger economy, all of that stuff. But under PH 1.0, it was just one man, right? Because he had resigned from UMNO, he'd formed Bersatu. Majority of those members in Bersatu were those who were actually thrown out of UMNO for one reason or another. And that's all you had. You didn't have the rump Malays supporting you. You didn't have corporate Malaysia supporting you. You had no one. And similarly for the other Pakatan Harapan members, DAP and PKR, they were never in government, right? So they didn't have people to step in. You didn't have first-line people to come in and become technocrats, right? What you had were politicians, great at rallying people, great at building excitement, but not necessarily so good at implementing government policy.
Yeah, that's true.
Or learning how to do that. And the problem is also, in any other democratic system, when a new administration takes up, yes, they will be talking crap about the previous administration, but when they take up, they try and build unity. So they try and use people from the previous administration in the current administration. Even the Republicans and Democrats do that in the US. Conservatives and Labour in the UK also do that. But what happened in Malaysia was, instead of having South Africa's truth and reconciliation style, where you admit you are wrong, you admit and then you work together to build a country, we started having something more akin to the Spanish Inquisition, where you take people, you torture and you persecute them. Not prosecute, you persecute them. So, in that kind of climate, a climate of fear, do you think professionals would want to come and join you? Do you think those within the civil service would be willing to give that additional bit to help the government? Do you think people with ideas will want to contribute? No, because everyone's afraid. Why? Because for 61 years we had this system, and almost everyone in the country had some link or another to the previous administration.
Yeah.
So the fear was palpable, right? Oh, fine, I come forward and contribute. Then all of a sudden you find out that my cousin's uncle's brother is somehow related to somebody in MIC or MCA or what have you, and then I'm persona non grata.
Yeah, that was a problem.
So at that point you lose talent, right? And so they didn't have talent, right? So the first couple of months, even the Prime Minister's office, there were so many offices empty. And it's not because there was huge amounts of space in Perdana Putra. The fact was they just didn't have enough people that they could appoint to these positions. They just didn't have it. There was just no one.
Yeah.
There was just no one.
Speaking of appointees, of course, one of the highlights of PH 1.0 was the mention of the Council of Elders, which sounded like a Star Wars council, right? When I first said, wow, that's a cool name. It was Robert Koch, Zeti Aziz, who else was it there? There was a few other people.
Tan Sri Dayam Zainuddin. He was the one leading the
thing,
council.
Right. So, of course, then later on it was turned to Council of Eminent Persons. Again, super name. I mean, I got to say, super name. But you call this book, in this book, you call them an illegal entity. And the way you describe them almost equates them to the Gestapo of, Nazi Germany. Why was the CEP so dangerous?
Well, the first thing is the CEP, actually, I'll use Council of Elders because, that was Mahathir's initial name for them. And that's not a new idea, right? He had come up with this in 2015. Or 2016, he was already talking about this. He was saying that no, any prime minister shouldn't have any power to run the country. They need this council of elders to actually, advise them. And this is the advice that they needed to take. I thought that was the role of cabinet and parliament, but obviously I could be wrong. These are people who are voted, in by the voters. Not independent people advised and all of a sudden influencing the government. But again, I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. So why was Council of Eminent Persons dangerous? Because they were not set up as an inquiry, by an act of parliament. They were not set up by the court. They were not voted in to office. These were all individual people that were all of a sudden appointed to this council that was supposed to help with economic policies, that was supposed to assist Mahathir. Then we find out, and I'm not saying this, you read the newspaper reports, then we find out that Tun Daim, that Tan Sri Daim,
Tun
Daim, you're right, that Tun Daim then speaks with the Chief Justice and Chief Judge of Malaya, and according to newspaper articles, not me, according to newspaper articles, then instructs them to resign. An unelected official, no power whatsoever, then orders the Chief Justice of this country and the Chief Judge to resign, which they do several days later. That was the power of the Council of Eminent Persons, right? Then my understanding is that heads of GLCs of all these government companies were called by this Council of Eminent people, right? And they were to brief this council, right? So the question is, fine, okay, they brief. What did you do with that briefing? Until today, the CEP has not filed any report. We have no report as to what the CEP actually did, right? So what was this information used for then, right? All these GLCs showing you all the details of their, of who they're going to be doing business deals with, what their weaknesses, what their strengths are. Could certain businessmen then be using this as an opportunity to build their business empire?
Could be.
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll leave it to you to guess.
Exactly. Could it be possible?
I don't know. Read the book to find out the answer.
Exactly.
Because he also names the person that he thinks is that person. Now,
read the book.
Read the book. Seriously, read the book. There's more coming. So now let's go to one of the revelations in this book that I had no idea about. Of course, one thing that was big in PH 1.0 was the surrendering of power to Anwar Ibrahim, which we all know now that perhaps Mahathir did not want to do. You talk about it a lot. We'll get to that shortly. But the thing is here, you mentioned that the person who was earmarked to become Prime Minister, to become Mahathir's successor, was Azmin Ali. When I think in the news it was mentioned it was Shafi Abdal maybe, then, later on that it became Tan Sri Muhyiddin. Now, why do you think Mahathir singled Azmin Ali out to be his successor at the early part?
Well, I think, a lot of people, and you see, this is the thing, you have to understand Malaysian political history. And a lot of people maybe are born after events that happened in the 80s and in the 90s and so are unaware. And many of us, as Mahathir said, Melayu mudah lupa. So, we forget things. But I need to remind people that actually Mahathir had a relationship in terms of, what I mean by relationship was he knew Azmin Ali even before Anwar knew Azmin Ali. And in fact, it was Mahathir that recommended Azmin to Anwar, to work with Anwar. So as a result, there was already a pre-existing relationship between Azmin and Mahathir. Mahathir knew Azmin Ali, as a person, his character, what he was capable of. So that relationship existed back in the 1980s, 1990s. So speed up to 2018. The reality of the situation, or 2016 actually, when Mahathir realized that, look, I need to get hold of the opposition, I need their support. And of course, he had demonized Anwar. He privately told many individuals that he still believed Anwar was guilty of the first round of sodomy accusations, the second round as well, that Anwar, had to pay for his crimes. That was his belief, and he still believed at that point that Anwar should not be Prime Minister of the country. But he had to agree, right? Political expediency in terms of getting the support of PH meant that he had to agree to having Anwar as Prime Minister. But his choice was, at that point, Azmin Ali. Why? Because he saw Azmin, after Azmin became Selangor Menteri Besar and had performed very strongly as an opposition leader, that he had what it took to lead PKR. And he could be someone that could be trusted because he wasn't involved in all these scandals. He was involved in reformasi and all of these activities. So he thought, yeah, great. What I need to do is I need to groom Azmin. And of course, in the process, split PKR, right? Split PKR, groom Azmin, hopefully then get him and his faction to defect to my side, to Bersatu, and then I can actually appoint him, once we are secure, as the next Prime Minister. He can take over. He would be an acceptable face of the next Malaysian Prime Minister.
But you see, so that's interesting that you say that, because although that plan sounds perfect, but it lacks the reason. It lacks an excuse. So that's where the sex tape comes in. Now, this sex tape, of course, I want to highlight. You've also mentioned this book that the police chief at that time confirmed that it wasn't Azmin in the video, right? But although that, he confirmed that the video is authentic and they cannot identify the identities of these two individuals. Now, as you rightly mentioned, and you mentioned this book, Tun Mahathir's plan was to bring in Azmin Ali into Bersatu. As you controversially have said recently, that Bersatu at that time was a gang of mat rempets that FMT have picked up. And at this point, but the problem is, as I said, Tun Mahathir did not have an excuse. Now, of course, the initial blame for the sex tape went to Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, who you write in this book, in a conversation with Tun Mahathir, vehemently denies it.
Yep.
And I believe him. Could this be that the video had come from Tun Mahathir's camp? Because the video proved to be the last piece of the puzzle he had. Because after this video came out, then Azmin Ali publicly showed his allegiance to Mahathir. This was the reason he needed to bring Azmin into Persatu.
Look, to be very, very honest with you and very frank, that could be possible. Because he is a man who has numerous machinations and numerous plans all going on at the same time.
Yeah.
All going on at the same time. But if it were individuals, who were within Datuk Seri Anwar's camp, and if they had planned this, clearly it was without his knowledge. And this happens so often in all political parties. I mean, where the leaders are unaware of what their own people are doing. They believe that they are helping their leaders when actually they end up, messing up the situation. These guys in Anwar's camp clearly miscalculated, because it backfired in such a massive way. Because as you know, in Malaysia, when you want to bring somebody down, the fastest way to do it is through a sex scandal.
Yes, definitely.
That's what you do.
It captures our imagination.
Exactly. You just all
sex
you do
is the way to go.
That's it. You use sex. So in this instance, the removal of Azmin was actually and I find it hard actually that Mahathir would do it. Why? Because Mahathir wanted somebody who was clean in that sense, who didn't have the sex element involved. And I think that, along with Datuk Seri Azmin's inability to deliver on the economy, inability to actually help, or rather, opening his mouth when he shouldn't have on the ECRL issues, all of these things, at that point then made Mahathir lose confidence.
Yes. You talk about that in the book as well.
Yeah. And I think the sex tape was the final nail in the coffin, because Mahathir would not be able to accept anyone who would even been impugned by something like the whole sex tape issue. So in his mind, Azmin was then at that point a write-off.
Write-off, yeah, exactly. Now, again, you talk about another thing you mentioned is something called Project Hijrah, where Mahathir was sort of together with Tan Sri Muhyiddin, who was running it at the back, basically trying to get de facto UMNO members into Bersatu, because they had, as you mentioned, at that time Bersatu was known as more like a Mat Rempit group, and they needed more caliber within Bersatu, right? Now, my question is, despite Mahathir, and again you mentioned this in this book where you talk about him setting up the entire infrastructure in UMNO that sort of financed the party, businesses, hundreds of businesses and all that, he has done so much for UMNO and he's become synonymous with UMNO. Why did he choose to build Bersatu instead of rebuilding UMNO?
The reality was that, twice, don't forget, twice he resigned from UMNO.
Yeah, twice.
Right? One was under Pak Lah's era, second time was under Najib's era. So in his mind, he had basically written off UMNO completely. And this was reflected when he met with Zahid and the top UMNO leaders just weeks after G14, when he, literally just, lambasted them. Baso is the Malay word that he used. Literally he had written off UMNO. What he wanted was people that were loyal to him. The fact that he resigned indicated to him that basically he didn't want to go back. And he didn't have the support in UMNO anymore, right? And if these people didn't support him, he didn't want them, right? So he had to build his own infrastructure. And, Mahathir has always had a love-hate relationship with UMNO. Why? Because firstly, yes, he was president. Yes, everyone used to kiss his hand, they used to bow to him, listen to him in deference. And then they would be calling him Nyanyo. They'd be calling him all kinds of, names. They'd be ostracizing him. He would be no longer welcome at events. So it was difficult, right?
Yeah, difficult relationship.
You as a veteran leader, you felt that you've given so much to the party, and now this is how the party treats you. So of course you feel offended. You feel that fine, you don't want me anymore. Let me get rid of you. That's the end. You've ended your relationship with me. I'm gonna end you.
Yeah,
it's that kind of a perception. So
I mean, yeah. But speaking of Tun Mahathir, even I think this was kind of known before of him spying on his members, collecting dirt on his members, and that's why he went for the sodomy case with Anwar, right? He had collected information and all that. In this book, you talk about him actually spying on members like Tan Sri Lim Kit Siang. And also you mentioned that apparently Lim Kit Siang had gone abroad to meet the Malaysian Chinese diaspora outside of Malaysia and wanting to bringing them back here in Malaysia. Why was he doing that? Okay,
so let me set the record straight. Now, once and for all, let me set the record. I am not saying any of this.
No, he's not. He's not.
This does not come from me. Everyone's saying that. I'm not saying this. I have no idea what Tan Sri Lim did not do. I respect Tan Sri Lim. He is an amazing person. Far be it from me to say this. I am saying that this is what reports from the security services were presented to Mahathir. These reports said that Tan Sri Lim did these things. I am not saying that.
Okay, fair enough.
These reports are saying it. So I need to be very clear so people understand this is not coming from me.
Yeah.
If you have if you want to take this up with anyone, please take this up with
the police.
The police.
He was the chief of police, I think, who was reporting.
The thing is, the question we should have is why the Prime Minister ordered the security services to do this. The security services on their own would not make a decision. This would be an instruction that came down. So I think that's the question that we need to ask. Why did the sitting Prime Minister then order the security services to do something like this? Right? And security services are professional civil servants. They follow the instructions of whoever is in power. If you tell me to do this, this is what I have to do as part of law. Right? So why do you need to spy on your own people?
But that's politics, right? I mean, that's understandable that
again,
a leader would do that.
If you spy on your opposition, yes, there have been so many cases all over the world where governments spy on the opposition. But you don't spy on your own buddies, do you? I mean, on the guys that you're sitting with, the guys in cabinet with you, these are not the people that you should be spying on. Because that shows the lack of confidence and
course.
trust
Of course.
in the government that you are heading. And of course, I suppose that reflected then in basically his plan to overthrow his cabinet in the first place.
To collect dirt on them and use it when he wants to. His ammo, yeah.
Could very well be.
Yeah.
Could very well be.
Now, let's move to 1MDB. This is, of course, a very
fun.
Yes. Now, in your writing, it comes out, it very clearly comes out that you are a supporter of Najib. You think you think things did not happen as it should have. So I want to get into that. Let's go. Now, you said that they were... okay, not you said, but in the book it's written. My goodness,
Right.
what should I say now?
Yes. No, we have to be careful. We have to be very careful, yes.
In the book, it says, written by itself, magically,
I like that.
magically, that there were external forces influencing MACC in the investigation of Najib. Can you elaborate on that?
You see, the thing is, MACC, again, is a civil service body. They work very hard. They work very hard to root out corruption. But a body is only as good as whoever leads that body. That body, whatever direction they receive, who they receive that direction from, that's how the body moves. And so the question that I have is, who was in charge at the material time of these bodies when these incidents happen? That's the question that I have. The issue that I have is when reports that MACC came up with and submitted, what happened to these reports? Why were these reports not referred to? Why were these reports buried? And only years later do we find out, actually there is a report. And even today, no one's willing to come out and confirm that these reports were there. We know the reports were there. We know that this is actually, these things actually happen, but no one wants to come out and confirm the validity of these reports. Why? Because then, the moment they do that, then we realize that, hey, actually, there was some other game afoot. The game was not necessarily to try an individual based on just pure evidence. The game afoot was also to bury evidence that might necessarily be of benefit to the individual, so that to present an image of complete and utter guilt, when the reality is that the judgment has to be based on probability of guilt, right? On the probability of how guilty this person is, rather than anything else, which is the situation that we face. Which is the situation. So the issue with Datuk Seri Najib is very simple in my view. Allow the evidence, allow the admission of all of this evidence, and make a decision. Right? Don't say, "Oh, we can't admit this, we can't admit that." For all these reasons, just admit it. I respect the judgment of the courts. I respect the judgment of the federal court. All of these I respect. But nonetheless, I'm saying justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. And in this instance, justice was not seen to be done. If you want the details, read my book. It's all in there. I list them point by point.
Yes, you do.
And I must admit, or not even admit, I must say very clearly, I am not here to defend Datuk Seri Najib. It's not my job. I'm not being paid to defend Datuk Seri Najib. But what I'm telling you is from what I have seen and from my working relationship with the man. Do I believe that he is guilty of all of these things? No, I don't believe that he's guilty of these things. But I believe...
All of these things? Or
I mean, all these criminal offenses that he's being charged with. I don't think he's guilty of these criminal offenses. But what I think he is guilty of is listening to advisors around him who are on the payroll of certain individuals, right? And taking actions based on this advice and being a gentleman about all of these things. Yes, he is guilty of that. He's guilty of being a patsy. Yes.
a patsy? Come on.
I would use the word, yes.
Okay, so let's go deep into it then.
Okay.
Let's start the first part. You talk about, let's start with Arul Kanda.
Okay.
You call him a scapegoat. Why?
Okay, let's just look at this thing logically, all right? All of this money and stuff that was siphoned out was done between 2009 to 2012, 13, 14. All this stuff, it all happened then. Arul Kanda came in 2015. After all of this happened, how can he be guilty of what happened when he was not even there? Okay, logically, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Right? Look at this thing logically. I mean, you come in after and then you're blamed for all the stuff that happened before you.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, because in the timeline that you present, yes. Because I must admit, I think everyone was just taken up by this whole case when it happened. Nobody wanted to look at the facts or discern.
You see, so that's why I'm saying the entire thing, right? I mean, when you look at what happened in PH 1.0, it was the Spanish Inquisition. It was not an attempt to actually understand what happened, hold people to justice, bring them to account, and then move on. That was not the aim. Was effectively to destroy individuals.
Okay,
right?
Then let's go to this. You talk about. I mean, I should stop saying that, but
Sure,
in the
sure.
book it is written
Yeah.
that that the lead prosecutor at that time was the famous Gopal Sri Ram. You say, I mean, in the book again, I stopped saying that. I edit
Sure,
this part out.
sure.
But again, it's mentioned that there was a glaring conflict of interest. What was this conflict of
Okay,
interest?
right. Let's just be very clear about this thing. I have the highest of respect for Tan Sri Gopal Sri Ram.
Yeah.
An amazing man,
Amazing
amazing lawyer, really one of the finest legal minds in the country. Okay? The late Tan Sri Gopal Sri Ram.
Yeah.
But this does not take away from the fact that Tan Sri Gopal was Mahathir's lawyer before GE14. This also doesn't take away from the fact that he went to see Tan Sri Apandi, the then sitting Attorney General. And in Tan Sri Apandi's words, not mine, who Tan Sri Apandi actually outlined this
In his book.
in his on social media. He outlined this very clearly, how Tan Sri Gopal approached him and told him that he had to lock Najib up even without any evidence. Just go ahead and do it. He had arranged, allegedly, Tan Sri Gopal had arranged for the cops to be there to to make the arrests and what have you, to lock Najib up, even based on no evidence. This is from the word of the then sitting Attorney General. Okay? And then after GE14, so after all these events transpire, Tan Sri Gopal is then set as the lead prosecutor to prosecute Najib. Just looking on that, would you not think that there is a conflict of interest? I, as a layman, would think that there is a conflict of interest. Because again, using the maxim that everyone uses, justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. So, given the fact that the first judge in Najib's case was removed, right? Datuk Sofian, whose brother, if I'm not mistaken, was a member of the UMNO in Pahang or something. And as a result of that link, he wasn't on the Supreme Council, wasn't anywhere close to Najib, but because he was an UMNO member in Pahang, he was recused. Because you did not want a perception that justice was not being given. So, given that the judge was recused, don't you think it would have made sense to have removed Tan Sri Gopal as the lead prosecutor?
Yeah,
just
it makes
based
sense.
on this.
Definitely makes sense.
Just based on this.
Definitely makes sense.
So that's what I'm saying. So that's why I'm saying, you have to make sure it is not just the perception, right? It's not just that you show that you do it, but you show that justice is being done. We need to see that, and in Najib's case, we did not see that. In so many instances, and the book lists, there are just too many to go through here.
Yeah.
There are too many of these instances to list that. So this is why, based on this, I say he is not guilty.
And speaking of which, it is also pointed out whereby he, as you mentioned just now, you said that he's guilty of listening to advice from his advisors. One of them was, of course, Bank Negara Governor then, Ms. Azati Aziz, on certain transactions, right?
Yes.
Now, but come on, is this enough to cast doubt on his guilt? Because claiming ignorance does not mitigate guilt.
I agree with you 100%. Claiming ignorance does not mitigate any guilt. But as he claimed, if you are told by the then sitting governor of Bank Negara, the head of the regulatory board, that you can actually go ahead and do these things, you would go ahead, because if the head's telling you that you can do this, you can do, of course, and that's in contention, right? Because Zeti says she did not say that. So then it goes up to the credibility of Tan Sri Zeti, right? Her credibility. Then we find out that she, who was supposed to be a witness against Najib, was removed from the case. Then we also find out that in a press statement from the MACC, right, money was returned, 100 million US dollars were returned from Singapore, right? The Criminal Affairs Division in Singapore returned that money because it was money in Zeti's husband's account. Again, I'm not saying this.
Yeah.
This is what was said by the MACC and Singapore's CAD.
And this was known then
right?
as well. Yeah.
And this 100 million, they said was linked to Jolo and 1MDB. Okay? So at that point, you have to ask yourself, what is the credibility of this individual and their witnesses? Because this money that was involved in 1MDB and paid by Jolo was kept in Singapore. And nobody knew about it. And the CAD had submitted this report, funnily enough, in 2015, when Zeti was governor of Bank Negara, to Bank Negara for investigation. What happened to that report?
Gone with the wind.
Was there action taken on that report?
No.
We don't know. We don't know. So you have to question the credibility of the witnesses involved in this case.
Correct.
So at which point you have to ask, so maybe Datuk Seri Najib did tell the truth. Maybe this is what did transpire. But because of these interests of these individuals who were bought by the mastermind around Najib, purchased all these people, he was given the wrong information. That's why I say he was a patsy. This is why.
Okay.
Again, agree, disagree, it doesn't matter.
But that's the beauty of this book. It creates debate. And that's the fun part of it, about it.
That's it.
Now, again, still sticking on this, another character that you bring up here is the one, Justice Nazlan, who allegedly, there were questions about him as well. In the book, it's mentioned about how there were MACC documents that went missing, even though the AG had publicly stated earlier that they were examining them. There was the case of that he was not following protocol. There was also an unexplained 1 million in his account. So it sounds like, as this book may suggest, that there was a conspiracy around Najib to convict him. So my point, and I wanna get your final say in this. Do you think he was wrongfully convicted? Do you think he actually wasn't guilty?
I believe that, well, and I have to phrase this very carefully because I don't want to be in contempt of court. I don't want to be in contempt of anyone. I believe that Najib did not receive justice. I believe that he did not receive justice. There are so many instances, and the instances with Justice Nazlan, with all of this, are listed in the book. I'm not going to go through it here because, again, for fear of contempt in court, it's listed down specifically. The arguments are succinctly mentioned in there. Please read them, and you will see what I mean. You will understand exactly the point that I am getting at. And you will understand why I say Najib did not receive justice.
Okay. Let's go to another character in the book whom you are very critical of. One, Tommy Thomas. Tan Sri Tommy Thomas, to be exact. Very critical of him, in fact. It is claimed by all the incidences in this book that there was clear abuse of power. I mean, even when I read it, I was shocked. I had such respect for him. But what exactly do you think that Tommy Thomas is guilty of?
You see, the thing is, again, what I'm saying, and I have to be again very clear, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just the messenger. The bulk of what is said is based on what's already publicly available. This is a special task force report that the government commissioned. So I'm not saying this. The government of Malaysia is saying this, right? The government of Malaysia, in its special task force report, says that Tan Sri Tommy Thomas has committed all of these specific incidents that they believe is a violation of these various laws, including the Official Secrets Act, not to mention many others. Right? They are saying that he is in violation. The problem is most people didn't realize what happened because this was a 500-page report that most people didn't bother to read. Now, if you read the report, I have just crystallized and summarized what the report, which has already been accessible since 2022, what the report said. And it is stunning, right? It is unbelievable that such actions could have taken place. The fact that we spent 13 million ringgit to get lawyers outside the Attorney General's chambers to come in and do the job of the Attorney General's chambers says a lot.
Especially the external lawyers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Given the fact that some of these lawyers allegedly were partners of the then Attorney General, were mentor of the Attorney General, and had some form of relationship with the Attorney General, and which was not declared according to the STF report, were not declared when these people were appointed, would clearly show a high conflict of interest in these appointments. And this, I believe, points back to the fact that Tan Sri Tommy Thomas, who I have a lot of respect for, was just the wrong person because he didn't have the experience or the ability to run something as large as the Attorney General's chambers.
That's it. Now, another thing is one amazing story here that comes out is the battle, sort of, you could say, between Tommy Thomas and Sundaraju. I mean, that was amazing how, he can demand his resignation even though he wasn't charged in court. Why do you think Sundaraju had to be taken down like this, in this fashion?
You see, I mean, that is actually a question I would love to ask Tan Sri Tommy, because the STF showed in very clear, in very clear ways how this entire process took place. The fact that the federal court no less, issued a judgment saying that Tommy Thomas persecuted, not prosecuted, persecuted. And again, this is not me saying it. I am quoting the federal court judgment. Persecuted makes you wonder what actually happened. Was it because, and I ask this question, was it because Sundaraju was viewed as too close to UMNO BN leaders? Was it because Sundaraju had a very good working relationship with VK Liu, the minister in charge of law? Was it because of this that Tommy had to remove him, allegedly had to remove him? I don't know. But that's a very, very good question, because the STF paints a picture very clearly of an individual who didn't have enough experience in this job, who was trying to do this job, and who I believe was drinking too much of his own Kool-Aid. When you're in opposition and you decide to demonize people, that's one thing. But when you're in government, it's completely different. You have to deal with them on a much more even keel. I believe that was not done, based on what I read in the STF report.
So now we come to the end of the PH 1.0, and we come to the part where democracy in Malaysia took a turn for the worse. The backdoor government, where the mandate of the people was thrown out just after 32 months. It was a sad day, very sad day. And in fact, just yesterday I had an interview and I was telling my guests, I said, the way politics is in now Malaysia, it's so hard for me to even do this podcast because I'm talking about the same thing and I don't see any change. But anyway, that's just a voter's ramblings. Sorry, I got a bit emotional there. Now, it is alleged that past President Hadi Awang, again, this is also in this book, it's very interesting, where he warned Tun Mahathir of a plot orchestrated by Anwar and Kit Siang to cast a vote of no confidence in Parliament. But considering how DAP was so agreeable with PH 1.0, and in fact, even in this current government, they're very agreeable, they don't really rock the boat too much. Was there any truth in this?
You see, that's the thing. Basically, my belief is that these various groups wanted to get into power. And what they needed to do, this grand, alliance, this grand coalition that Mahathir had ordered Muhyiddin to set up. This grand coalition needed to get into power. Mahathir was not moving fast enough. They wanted Mahathir to basically implode the Pakatan government so they could form Pakatan National or Perikatan National, whatever the government, eventually became called. But Mahathir was very slow. So the only way to do it was to instill fear in Mahathir, to tell him, look, Anwar is planning this, they're planning to take over, they're doing all of this. And maybe he was, I don't know. But the reality, or rather my perception, my belief, is that this was told in order to push Mahathir to the edge. And a lot of this would have worked if it wasn't for the fact that, right before the 21st or 23rd May, the 21st May meeting, Mahathir in his mind had already decided, oh hell, I might as well hand it over to Anwar at this point. I can't trust Muhyiddin. I can't trust Azmin. And of course, I say all of this, this is my belief. I have no idea of knowing what was exactly in Mahathir's mind at that point. Maybe he wanted to go on holiday to Switzerland, I don't know. But I believe this is what happened, just before that meeting. Mahathir finally decided, and that's what gave the impetus to Tan Sri Muhyiddin and all of these other leaders to push very hard by the 23rd. For Bersatu, to pull out of Pakatan Harapan and Azmin and everyone else, causing the collapse of PH 1.0. It was a very, very sad day. Very sad day.
But one thing in your book that I find very hard to swallow is that you say that Tun Mahathir was blindsided by Tan Sri Muhyiddin's attempt. I just can't believe that, because Mahathir is, regardless of whether you like him or hate him, he is a master strategist.
You see...
No, but hold on. Let me just...
Okay, all right.
And, could it be that this was all his plan, and his sort of silence and even setting up Pejuang was all just a gambit to show that he had nothing to do with it, when actually he was one of the men holding the strings?
You see, that's the thing, with Mahathir, it is the man, the myth, the legend. You have to understand. I mean, for 22 years, he shaped our political scape, our mindscape, our views, everything. Even today, it resonates, in the way Malaysians interact with one another, in the way we handle politics. So, we have to give him credit for that. But we also have to understand that he is human. And he is a man in his 90s, right? I believe this was the second mistake. The first mistake that Mahathir made was in not realizing how UMNO and PAS would use his own rhetoric against him on the ground. His rhetoric against non-Malays, how they would use it against him. He did not count on that. And the second mistake was this. I believe that his assessment of the situation was that when Muhyiddin saw him on the 29th, was it the 29th? Saw him on the morning of the 29th, not the 29th. Saw him on the morning of the 24th. Saw him on the morning of 24th February and told him that Bersatu was going to pull their support. Regardless, they were just going to pull their support. That he sat there and thought, no, you have to do it according to my plan. Because the agreement with Bersatu the day before, when the Supreme Council met, the agreement was they would give Mahathir a week to pull out from Pakatan Harapan to cause the collapse. So doing it immediately on the 24th was going against Mahathir's plans, his well-laid plans. The fact that they gave him a week clearly tells us Mahathir knew that Bersatu was going to pull the rug. He was obviously the man behind this new coalition to be set up. That was his plan, right? But at 93, 94 years old, he was now being told that, look, we are going to do this now. It's going to be a fait accompli. Which is why the title of my first book is Akibat Mahathir Merajuk. He went into a sulk. I believe he went into a sulk. How dare they implement this plan that I had, without consulting me and doing it when I don't want it to be done. Dude, it's your plan.
Now, I mean, again, I have to highlight this is just one very interesting and fantastically written book. But one thing you said now, you call Najib a patsy. So if Najib is the Patsy, not Patsy, sorry, the Patsy.
Patsy, yeah.
Patsy, who was the guy standing at the grassy knoll?
I think the big question you have to ask is who got the largest amount of money, right?
Yeah.
Who is the one who... I asked all the readers, you've read all the books, all the documents have come out, all this money has been repatriated to Malaysia. Where did all of this come from? Someone's done a deal with the Department of Justice. Who's done a deal with the Department of Justice? Has Najib done a deal with the Department of Justice? Has Najib been charged by the Department of Justice? Has Najib got a yacht? Has Najib got Van Gogh paintings? You decide. The person that gets the most amount of money is usually, in my
in
view,
history it's like that,
the person that's the mastermind. The person that's left holding the bag with the smallest amount of money, that's pretty much the patsy.
One character that is missing in this book is the infamous Jolo. What do you think is his fate now?
That is a very good question. I mean, I saw with interest the deal, that he just recently cut. I must admit, I've never met Jolo. I've only heard, because I came in to work with Najib long after Jolo was gone from the scene. So I had to deal with the fallout from all of the things that were done, prior to that. So it's very interesting to see. I'm just wondering what this means. Does this mean that he can now go back to the US? Does this mean all charges have been removed? And fundamentally, we need to bring him back to this country. We have to bring him back to this country to stand trial and to be judged and to fess up. The fact that that he's able to give so much of money to the Department of Justice, all of this money has come back. I mean, to a normal person, that would indicate you are guilty of something. So you should be charged and you should be made to stand trial here. And I think Malaysian government must continue in its efforts to get him and to bring him back here. And I believe that if he is put on trial, he'll definitely exonerate Datuk Seri Najib.
Okay. Now, I mean, it's a very different perspective when you say that he's a patsy. That word has never been used for Najib in this entire years. Now, last but not least, in the aftermath of it all, now the dust has settled. Do you think we as a country are in a better place compared to PH 1.0?
I think we as a country are in a much better place because for the first time since, I believe, 1971, we actually have the vast majority or a large majority of the Malays and a vast majority of the Chinese working together in a unity government. So we have that goodwill from both communities to help build a new Malaysia, right? If you ask me, was PH 1.0 a new Malaysia? No. But PH 2.0 has the promise of being a new Malaysia. We have got the people. We need to stop the politicking. We need to build a vision to help this country develop. Datuk Seri Anwar has got a good team. He's got people who know what they're doing. You've got the technocrats and what have you from UMNO. You have got the thinkers from DAP. You have got individuals who can really build this nation. Now is the time to stop all of this, polemic, stop this nonsense, rebuild the trust among the races, start working together and do something. It's great you've reduced the price of eggs by 3 cents, but we need to bring more jobs to this country, right? High-skilled jobs. We're not talking about just call centers. We're talking about bringing in technology, semiconductors, things that will make a difference to the life of the average Malaysians. That can be done. That can be delivered by this Prime Minister because he has the mandate of the people. I believe he can do it. Yes, there are all kinds of teething issues. Of course, and there will always be groups trying to, jockey for power. But the reality is, if you are able to deliver on all of these grounds for the Malaysian people, they will vote you in. I believe this government will continue until the next election, but its success will be dependent on whether they can deliver what Malaysians want, which is basically a better economy, money in their pockets, healthcare, jobs for their kids, and a peaceful, stable political situation.
Perfect way to end this interview. And just like the book as well, it ends with a chapter of hope and a vision for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I read this book and I recommend it again. This is a fantastic book. It's on sale now.
Yes, it is.
It is on sale now.
Yes.
You can get it from Kinokuniya, if I'm not mistaken.
You can get Kinokuniya, Sutaya, you can get it from S-Lite, MPH. So all the main outlets, please go. If one has run out, go to another. You will definitely be able to get it. And I'm sure you'll put on the
links.
URL, the links as well for
Yes.
pre-ordering. If you'd like to order it online, you can definitely do that on Amazon, at the Kinokuniya site, and many other places as well.
Yeah, so thank you again, Romen. I must say this book is fantastic. As he said, we'll be sharing the links in the descriptions of all the videos that we upload. Go get a copy of for yourself. It'll be a quick read because this book moves fast. It's like a train. It doesn't stop. It's like a night train. It just goes. And it has so many revelations. Honestly, it's despite everything. I in fact, while I was reading this book, I actually started. I got a bit nostalgic, and I went on YouTube and watched a scene from Parliament of Lim Guan Eng, famously asking KJ, do you know about the money that went missing and all that, the GST money that we need, Rompa and all this. I miss that. I do miss that. I do miss that. It's so much drama and all that. Yeah, but this book has a lot of drama. So thank you so much, Romen.
Thank
I
you,
loved it. I honestly
Cheers.
did. And such an honor to have you on.
Thank you.
By the way, I must say you have one of the coolest names I've ever heard, Romen Bose.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you very much.
It's like a Bond villain name or something.
Oh, I love it. Oh, there you go. James Bond, Roman Bose. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so
and
much.
wish you all the best in this book and in the journey of your life. And to all of you all, again, if you guys have any, as always, please like, share, subscribe, and share your comments. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to discuss about this. The videos will be coming up very soon. So till next time, guys, take care and have a good day. Bye.